Contemporaries of William Shakespeare. Philip Sidney. Born on November 30, 1554, in Kent, England, Sir Philip Sidney hailed from a distinguished lineage. His father, Sir Henry Sidney, held the esteemed position of Lord President of Wales, while his uncle, Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester, was a close confidant of Queen Elizabeth I. Sidney embarked on his academic journey at Christ Church College, Oxford University, in 1568, where he studied until 1571 before embarking on a European sojourn, leaving his formal education incomplete. Returning to England in 1575, Sidney's stature continued to rise as he assumed the prestigious role of cupbearer to Queen Elizabeth. His diplomatic talents soon came to the fore when he was dispatched to Germany as an ambassador in 1577. Following his return, he emerged as a patron of the arts, nurturing talents like the renowned poet Edmund Spenser. Concurrently, Sidney remained actively engaged in political affairs, vociferously opposing Queen Elizabeth's proposed union with the French heir and furthering his involvement as a member of Parliament during the early 1580s. Sidney's literary legacy shines brightly in the annals of the Elizabethan era. Notably, he crafted significant works such as Astrophel and Stella, which stands as the inaugural Elizabethan sonnet cycle, and Arcadia, a distinguished prose romance of a heroic nature. His contribution to literary criticism is encapsulated in The Defense of Poesy. While Sidney shared his literary endeavors with close companions, he opted against publishing his works during his lifetime. In 1585, Sidney undertook the role of governor for the Dutch town of Flushing. Demonstrating his unwavering commitment to the Protestant cause, he actively participated in the Battle of Zutphen alongside Sir John Norris in 1586. Tragically, he sustained a gunshot wound to the thigh during the battle and succumbed to gangrene 26 days later, a mere 31 years of age. An emblematic anecdote from his final moments speaks volumes of his character. Despite his own dire condition, Sidney selflessly removed his thigh armor to ensure parity with his wounded soldiers. Even in his dying moments, he offered his water to a fellow wounded soldier, exemplifying his unwavering nobility and gallantry. On February 16, 1587, Sir Philip Sidney was laid to rest at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. His life, marked by intellectual brilliance, diplomatic finesse, and selfless valor, continues to inspire admiration and reverence through the pages of history. Arcadia, Astrophel and Stella, The Defense of Poesy are some of his most notable works. The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia. The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia, also known simply as the Arcadia, is a long prose pastoral romance by Sir Philip Sidney, written towards the end of the 16th century. Having finished one version of his text, Sidney later significantly expanded and revised his work. Scholars today often refer to these two major versions as the Old Arcadia and the New Arcadia. The Arcadia is Sidney's most ambitious literary work by far and as significant in its way as his sonnets. The story of Arcadia is extremely complicated. The scene in Arcadia is a fairy land of idealistic beauty where shepherd boys graze their herds of cattle. The story of Arcadia deals with the Duke Basilius, who, following an oracle, settles in a village with his young wife Gynecia and two beautiful daughters, Pamela and Philoclea. Two princes named Musidorus and Pyrocles come to Arcadia and fall in love with the two princesses. They secure entry into their household, the former in the guise of a lady and the latter that of a shepherd. The complication starts when the king and the queen fall in love with Musidorus disguised as a lady. After getting his real identity, the king takes him to a woman, and the queen tries to win his heart. Finally, by the courage of Pyrocles, the girls secure freedom and Musidorus escapes from the entanglement. He runs away with Pamela and all complications are resolved in the end. Both the story and the setting of Arcadia are far removed from reality. Everything in it is on the ideal plane. David Dacius remarks, ideal love, ideal friendship, and the ideal rule are directly and indirectly discussed, suggested, and embodied in Arcadia. The style of Arcadia is as artificial as that of John Lilly's Euphues. It is highly conceited. Consequently, critics and scholars of the work hold various views and criticisms, both positive and negative, regarding its style and relevance. William Hazlitt, for example, criticized the prose style of Arcadia as one of the greatest monuments of the abuse of intellectual power upon record. T.S. Eliot also called Arcadia a monument of dullness. William Shakespeare, on the other hand, based the subplot of Gloucester in King Lear on Sir Philip Sidney's Arcadia. Samuel Richardson took the name of Pamela for his novel Pamela. Sir Philip Sidney's Arcadia was appreciated by Charles Lamb and Virginia Woolf. The Old Arcadia. Sidney may have begun an early draft in the late 1570s when he was in his 20s. His comments indicate that his purpose was humble. He asserts that he intended only to entertain his sister Mary Herbert. This version is narrated in chronological order, with sets of poems separating the books from each other. It seems likely that Sidney finished this version while staying at Herbert's estate during a temporary eclipse at court in 1580. The New Arcadia. The version of the Arcadia known to the Renaissance and later periods is substantially more extended than the Old Arcadia. In the 1580s, Sidney took the frame of the original story, reorganized it, and added episodes, most significantly the story of the just rebel Amphialus. The additions more than double the original story. However, Sidney had not finished the revision at the time of his death in 1586. Astrophel and Stella. Astrophel and Stella, an Elizabethan sonnet sequence of 108 sonnets, interspersed with 11 songs by Sir Philip Sidney, written in 1582 and published posthumously in 1591. After William Shakespeare's sonnets, the work is often considered the finest Elizabethan sonnet cycle. The publication of Astrophel and Stella generated a vogue for the sonnet sequence, and among the English poets who responded was Edmund Spenser. He also wrote the elegy Astrophel after his friend Sidney's death in 1586. The cycle tells the story of Stella, or star, beloved by Astrophel, or star lover, who loves poetry almost as much as he loves her. He details his passionate feelings for Stella, his struggles with conflicting emotions, and his final decision to abandon his pursuit of her in favor of a life of public service. In observance of contemporary poetic conventions, Sidney discourses on reason and passion, which and will in the sonnets. Apology for Poetry. The Defense of Poesy, literary criticism by Sir Philip Sidney, was written about 1582 and published posthumously in 1595. Another edition of the work, published the same year, is titled An Apology for Poetry. Considered the finest piece of Elizabethan literary criticism, Sidney's elegant essays suggest that literature is a better teacher than history or philosophy. It masterfully refutes Plato's infamous decision to ban poets from the state in his Republic. It is generally believed that he was partly motivated by Stephen Gosson, a former playwright who dedicated his attack on the English stage, the school of abuse, to Sidney in 1579. But Sidney primarily addresses more general objections to poetry, such as those of Plato. In his essay, Sidney integrates several classical and Italian precepts on fiction. The essence of his defense is that poetry, by combining the liveliness of history with the ethical focus of philosophy, is more effective than either history or philosophy in rousing its readers to virtue. The work also offers essential comments on Edmund Spenser and the Elizabethan stage. Sidney states that there have been three general kinds of poetry. The chief being religious, which imitated the conceivable excellencies of God. Philosophical and imaginative poetry was written by ripe poets who teach and delight. Sidney composed his eloquent defense of imaginative literature against charges of time-wasting, prevarication, and allurement to vice. writing before England's great age of poetry and drama, too early to include William Shakespeare, for example, in his criticism. He therefore finds English literature sadly wanting. He does, however, praise such works as Geoffrey Chaucer's Troilus and Cresside, the anthology The Mirror for Magistrates, and Edmund Spenser's The Shepherd's Calendar. While Sidney's ideas are not considered particularly original, the work did introduce the critical thought of continental Renaissance theorists to England.